My name is Coprice Jones, and I will be speaking about how I was raped at the age of 13, and God allowed me to relive it at the age of 31, and I was set out on a mission to take my life. When I was 12 years old, my mom was going through an abusive divorce, and it led her down the road of us not having two parents in the home. By the time age 13, I was raped, abused, and molested by someone who I trusted, by a family member, someone who knew everything that was going on in my home, someone who knew the ins and out, knew that my mom was going through a divorce, my father would no longer be in a home with us. I believe that he took advantage of that situation. At the age of 13, I was on my way home from school, and I felt like something was going to happen. And on that particular day, I barricaded the door with a bunk bed. It was a twin bunk bed. I barricaded the door because my cousin, this particular cousin, visited us every day after school. And I was pretending like I was not going to be home on this particular day because my sister, her schedule was she was at work, and my brother, he was just out in the streets doing what he do after school. In our house, we have a key. So my cousin, he knew where the key was, and he let himself in, despite me barricading the front door. Because if you understand family typically don't knock on the door. They probably knock and still proceed to let themselves in because family is family. You know, we had an open door policy in my family. If you were family, you sure let yourself in. As I was sitting on the couch watching television, he shocked me. He was already in the home. I've always felt unease with this cousin because he was in my space, my sacred space, the line that you don't cross. It's not like he was just sitting next to me. He will always come into my violation space, but I will say that he was adopted into our family, so I don't know the boundaries that he felt, how the boundary between family, and that I don't know if he seen that we were family or we were strangers or we wasn't family because we wasn't by blood. And he started playfully touching me, and I started trying to fight back with him. At this particular day, I was tired because I didn't feel like fighting. He drug me into the basement, and I'll never forget, we were in an old home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In the basement, it had a boiler, a hot water boiler. So he threw me down, and I just asked him, please stop. What is it? I was raised spiritual. I really didn't understand body parts as if, you know how children understand body parts today. He began to rip my clothes off and rip my clothes off. So at this point, as the rape proceeded, I started bleeding. When he saw that I was bleeding, he said, oh, you better get up, you better get up. And I was in so much pain from fighting and struggling. He pushed me down the basement stairs. I ran upstairs and I ran a bath of water. I'm not understanding because I don't know what a virgin is. I don't know, I've never had intercourse or anything. I felt like I was at fault at this particular time. And I started crying because I did not understand why me, first of all. And then I didn't understand, like, do I say something? Do I not say anything? Because we were cousins and we were family, I still had to interact with this guy. And I had to keep this deep, dark secret. I was in 7th grade. And I remember my counselor calling my mom into the office. My counselor told my mom, I think your daughter needs to be in special education. They were telling her, I don't know, but I don't think she could read anymore. I was having nervous breakdowns. So I started blanking out. I never told my mom because my mom was already going through an abusive divorce. I did not want my mom to think that she needed to stay in an physically abusive relationship because I was raped. I kind of wanted to forget it. I kind of wanted to put it all behind me. Was promiscuous. I got pregnant at the age of 15. I ended up having a baby at the age of 16. I decided when I was 24 that I was going to move back to Chicago. And the premises of me going back is I wanted to tell my father what happened. And I wanted to tell the truth because I had to lie about the pregnancy because my father was like, how did you know about sex? And it was a list of questions. So as I moved to Chicago and life was going on. Life was life. I met this guy. Oh my God, he has a solid foundation. Everything looked well. It was fascinating. It was like, okay, now I have structure. I did notice some red flags in the beginning. It's cute in the beginning. As time went on, I noticed that I couldn't go to the bathroom without him knowing. So I'm thinking things are going to get better because it didn't feel like abuse. How can this be abuse? Wrestling with my mind if it's just a controlling issue. So one day I was giving my child a bath and I noticed that, and as I was carrying her out of the bathroom, he asked me, so this what you was doing all day? So my mind went all the way back to the age of 13. And so as I put my daughter down and I started, drying her off, that was the first time that I was struck. That led me to homelessness. He was the breadwinner, so I quit my job and I solely depended on him. In my mind, I knew I wanted to get out, but how do you get out when you don't have anything? I called my mom and I asked her if I could use one of her vans for a short period of time, and she said okay. I asked one of my cousins if she could help me pack to get out of this situation, and then everything will be okay. But where do you go? So I sat in the van with my child. I found us going to McDonald's to wash up, to brush our teeth, to eat. In the van, I used to put sheets up to the windows because, of course, we have all our belongings in the inside. I had pillowcase, I had sheets. So I would wrap the car in the inside with the sheets. No one can look. So I walk into DHS and it's all these paperwork, all this paper. Are you in an abusive relationship? I started reading. This is what it means. This is what it means. I checked every box in my brain. I fell down. I started crying right at DHS. And they were like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm in an abusive relationship. I accepted the hitting and the abuse as if it was my own because he felt bad. And I will allow guys to take their frustration out on me if it will make them feel better. After I left the shelter, I was 32 years old, and I decided to get into a relationship with a police officer because, they law abiding. So I knew that everything was going to be okay. I knew my life was going to be secure because a police officer is there to serve and protect. He used to come home from work and he had a bad day. If I did not have everything laid out to the T, his underwear, his night clothes, his food, in chronological order, I knew that it was going to be a problem. And so he goes into the room and I'm preparing the meal and he comes down the stairs and he stands behind me and I'm feeling like this should be feeling well, but the vibe is off. And he said, you know how I like things, right? And I was like, yeah, do you like it? He was like, yeah. But he grabbed the back of my head and he was like, what about my socks? He grabbed my head so hard and threw me down. I felt like dying at this particular time. So, because how do I put myself back? How do I get myself back in the same situation? As he threw me down, the only thing I could worry about was if my daughter was listening. But in the back of my mind, who's protecting me? What took place next is how I got out the situation with the police officer is that my dad was diagnosed with cancer. When that was my out for me. When I viewed my father lifeless, but blood still running through his vein, it shook my spirit. It felt like, that's me. I am lifeless. I am useless. And I said, don't worry about it because I'll never leave your side. And he was like, what about your family? You gotta go home, I don't want to interrupt anything. I was like, no. And never did he understand that, and never did he question that, because I wanted to deal with his situation versus telling him about my situation. I didn't never want to let my father know that I was a failure or I was going through, a domestic situation. I got an apartment on the north side of Chicago and I moved my father in with me because as the cancer progressed, I had to make a decision to put my father on hospice. I needed someone to love on and I needed someone to love me back. And when I moved my father in, I started journaling from the age of 13 when I lost myself. And I brought it all the way to the present. As I was journaling, I was releasing things that I was holding on to. My life got lighter. My life got lighter. I started focusing in on my father who needed me. who, time was short. We were up against time by the time my father moved in and we got my father settled. At this particular time, as I focused on my father, I had time to focus on myself. So I was pregnant at this particular time. And I knew that I could not continue life. Even though it was hard for me to accept the death of my father, but during the death of my father, I gained life. I am an end of life death doula, and I have been in business since 2014 in Chicago, Illinois. I am an author of 2 books, not one, but 2 books. I am one of the most sought after death doulas, and I just give it all back to God, because if I did not go through those struggles, the life that I have lived since 2014 to the present only could be God. Can I read this short poem out of my book? It's called I Suffered for You. The tears I cried, I wish I have died, but God allowed me to survive. The moans I cried in silence made, Lord, why didn't he just dig me a grave? The blood I bled running down my leg was the 5th time I wish I was dead. The grip he had around my neck, Lord, what did I do to deserve that? I didn't understand the slap in my face. Why was I in this situation in the first place? But God gave me the awesome grace that I needed to run this race. The sweeping pain my body must bear, yet I kept a secret afraid to share. The only thing I could say was, why me? And bow my head to pray. The very time you threw me down, I affirmed, don't worry, I'll still get my crown. The time you told me not to tell, God was watching. You're going straight to hell. The time you pulled at my hair, God knew how much I can bear. The 18 years you took, God prepared me to write this book. The Bible say forgive and forget. Son, I think you better repent. This time, son, you got away. Don't worry, you'll face God and me on Judgment Day. The word I speak, yes, they're true. Don't let it happen. I suffered for you.